Mark, this is a little bit different for any other episode of Storyland that I've done so far, because I'm calling you an expert. Is that what you would classify yourself as, an expert?
Oh, an interesting question for an academic. Yeah, I mean, this is very much one of the research interests I've got. Human psychology, I mean, particularly around male behavior, and especially around the interaction of how men and their mental health evolves across time and interacts with changes in society. So, yeah, it is an active research interest for us.
Okay, so I'll classify yourself as an academic. Is that the title, the official title you would normally go by?
Yeah,
I never know that at all. I was kind of professor, are you research, are you kind of what is it? But academic kind of covers a lot of things, doesn't it? It's broader.
Yeah, exactly. So I work at the university. I teach on our male psychology module, on evolutionary modules, and I also research in the area as well.
So that's at Sunderland as well.
Yeah, Sunderland University.
Are you from that area as well, Mark? Are you a Sunderland lad, or are you a Northeast lad? So what's your origin story?
Yeah, so I'm Northeast. I spent almost my entire life in North Shields, so the Newcastle side of things. Makes the football days quite interesting on campus, I suppose.
I think that's a psychology lesson in itself, is the psychology of football and the fandom and adult males in themselves. I mean, we could kind of brush on that topic later on if you want to, but let's get into how you got into this. I'm intrigued to how a person gets into this from an outsider looking in, or was it your own perspective you were looking at to kind of have an interest in it in the first place? So let's start there.
Yeah, okay. So there's quite an interesting little, I guess, phrase in psychology. It's like research is usually me search to some degree. So people tend to get into it, I guess, primarily from something in their experience where they want to understand why, they want to understand how behavior works. And I guess to some degree, that's very much what happened with me. Okay. So, I mean, when I was young, I didn't have, my family life was good. I had a decent childhood, but I did also get bullied a lot at school. And so I had a lot of mental health problems which kind of come out of that. And it took me a significant amount of time to kind of get myself back to quote normal, if you speak. And
so what age when this kind of started? I'm guessing, quite a reserved child. Is that the case as well?
Yeah,
as a person.
Absolutely. So I was a really shy child, and I understand a lot more about why this happens now. I'll touch on that if you'd like. But I mean, my childhood going into high school was fine. Getting into high school, I think it was usually from about second year in high school to the end, I was just bullied a lot across that time. So about 4 years of that. And you're right, I was very shy, very reserved, not particularly social, and it just makes you a target.
Do you think that kind of, it's like popular kids at school. Everyone wants to be the popular kid, and you look up to them. And we always try and be somebody or replicate somebody. There's some kind of person in our lives who kind of we hold aloft to be. I want to replicate. I want to be that person. Do you know what I mean? I want to, it's more like a mentor in life, isn't it? But when you're not, and you haven't got anyone to look at, and you're shy, you get targeted. It doesn't matter what you do, you're going to get targeted no matter what you do, and no matter who you are.
Yeah.
But I think somebody who's shy just kind of gets pushed down because it's a self-esteem thing. That's basically where it starts, isn't it? Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. And you see this quite commonly. So if I apply a bit of me academics to it, I suppose, from what I know. So puberty is a really big change in many different aspects of life. One of the things that it does is it starts to activate social competition. I don't want to call them programs because it's not quite right, but So we have a deep evolutionary history of needing to compete amongst the same sex and between sexes for status, for popularity, for mates and attractiveness. And you start to see that emerge in high school around the age of puberty. And you tend to find people quite commonly orientate themselves into status hierarchies, where you've got especially amongst men, you have high status individuals who are usually the popular, usually quite attractive individuals, usually have a lot of social supporters associated with them. And then they direct their competition strategies down the hierarchy a little bit in order to maintain that overall system. So if you come in and you're very shy, you're not one who's likely to compete, you find yourself subject to a lot of contest behaviors, which manifests as bullying, for instance.
It's like a pecking order, isn't it?
Yeah.
And the alpha male in the group is going to sniff out who's the weakest. It is really kind of down to that. It really comes down to that. Because what you're saying is, and I'm trying to think of like examples, and I've just got I can see it on the school ground, on the playground now, and the people. There's always the overconfidence. So I think as soon as somebody is like super confident, then they've already got one up on everybody else because they believe everything that they do. They don't have that switch that goes, you can't do that, you shouldn't say that. So therefore they're right, I'm number one. And now I'm going to test to see if people will follow me. I'm going to test to see if people will do what I'm going to do. And if they sniff a weakness, they're going to use it against you. And I think that's where the bullying comes in, isn't it?
Yeah, for sure. So this is just classic sort of male status contest, especially in young individuals. It changes a bit when you get older, but in young individuals, it's very much dominance orientated. So there you have slightly larger, slightly more confident, slightly more boisterous people who assert themselves in a status hierarchy. And if you don't do that, you become subject to the people who are slightly above you trying to maintain their status. So it tends not to be that the absolute peak of the contest necessarily bullies everybody. It's usually the ones that are a threat. So the ones that are closest to them. And then the further down the hierarchy, if you want to think of it that way, you go, you see the bullying directed down. So you tend to get bullied by those who are roughly around your status and not necessarily where you've got really big gaps, because there is a cost to pay for that.
It's similar in every guy's though, sort of like employment and stuff like that. It's sort of it is pecking orders and stuff. But it's mad. It's kind of, obviously I've got young kids and I see this as them now, but it doesn't matter how much advice you can give them, they've got to go through everything themselves. And I do feel like you have to let them figure this out, and it is frustrating from the outside looking in, but unfortunately you have to go. Everyone has a reset. It's like we've been on our journey, now the kids, they have to go through their journey. It doesn't matter, you can give the best advice in the world, unfortunately you're gonna have to go through it themselves.
That's true. And there's something to that. I mean, like, so take anxiety, for instance. You can sit and you can talk to people about how you get over anxiety, but one of the things that the data is quite clear on is the best way to do it is to expose yourself to it, and that way you learn, at least to some degree, that the fears you have of the consequences don't necessarily always live up to what you expect them to, and that builds resilience. So the more you expose, the more resilience you get, and then the less subject you are to the anxiety feelings. So to some degree, you just have to go through that sort of stuff, as awful as it can be, I think.
But it's learning skill sets, and it's building character as well. We say character. What is character? Well, it's kind of that, really. You can't not do things that are bad for you. You got to go through it. But if you know it's going to happen and you're okay with that, then I think that's the best position to put your mindset in, is going, there's good and there's bad. This is a bad thing, but I'm going to learn from the bad thing. You got to turn that into a positive in a way. But it's really hard when you're going through it.
It is. And it's interesting with that. So that there's some quite interesting stuff around childhood play. And one of the things that, well, the idea there is essentially childhood play as practice for adult dynamics. And young boys on average tend to have slightly more aggressive play styles than young girls do on average. And that, by the way, is something that crosses cultures and species. So you see that, and the argument there is that is young men, young boys, young males, learning how to navigate social context. So I sometimes wonder about the way that we modify practices with children, for instance, how that then later impacts things like schoolyard bullying, schoolyard dominance tactics and all that. If you learn a lot of it very early in childhood, especially around the aggressive play stuff, and that impacts later childhood, you wonder what happens if you shift those dynamics.
Well, you've got to be exposed to many different kind of scenarios, and I think that's the best way of doing it. It's lived experience in a way, and when you've done the lived experience, then you can kind of gain, a toolbox of skill sets to kind of get you through the rest of life. So, and kids are learning from earlier on. It's just kind of social cues, understanding other kids, so even from nursery age, even from babies, then pushing the boundaries, and that's what kids do, is push the boundaries to say what they can get away with and then fall back. But you've got the nature thing, and I do think nature is probably 80% of it, and then there's nurture as well, because I think you can do all the right things that you can. I mean, this is just from my experience, is to go, it doesn't matter what I say, you're going to do this anyway, because this is the way your brain is mapped. I really want to get into that, because I do think that is a thing. I'm no expert, but what I've seen is I've been around a lot of people, and I've seen lots of kind of patterns to it as well. And even exploring your own mind and your own self, you're always just trying to figure this out. How can you never find a solution, but you're just finding tools to manage this kind of thing. So I'm just intrigued about that, because as well as girls are more sort of mental, boys are more physical, and they are, because I've seen it. Do you know what I mean? But again, it's down to the individual. I've got, friends' kids, they throw a ball in, the girl will go and kick it, and that's what she wants to do. Another one will go, I don't want to touch this, my daughter doesn't, but the boys tend to kick the ball or play with the truck and all that. It's one of those, you just put them in front of them and see what works. And I think there's a majority thing in there as well. Sorry, I'm throwing like a million things at you.
No, it's cool.
It's a roundabout way. It's kind of the same thing that I'm trying to say. So it's the same subject of nurture and nature.
So this is exactly the thing that I'm interested in as an academic. So primarily I'm an evolutionary psychologist. So what I do is I look really at the functions of behavior. So how behaviors evolve, and how evolved behaviors might interact with the world that we see, the modern world. And one of the things that we do there is try to tease apart how these sort of innate, like deeply evolved systems interact with changes in society to impact people's behavior. So for instance, there you were talking about nature versus nurture, and about how much, I guess, impact parents have on offspring, on children. Sorry, I'm using me science terminology. Offspring's a really weird way to describe children, isn't it?
Yeah, we know what it means, so it's fine. It's all right.
So one of the things that's really cool, so there's this field called behavior genetics, and there you do various different experiments, different methods that allow you to estimate how much of behavioral variance, so how much of the way people differ in how they behave, is a result of genes, biology versus environmental influence. And what they suggest is that the main sources of behavioral variation are your genes. So they have a really big impact, and they have a big impact because they shape the brain, and they shape specifically the way the brain interacts with the world. And what's called the non-shared environment, which tends to be the environment outside of the household. So if you look at parents, outside of like a lot of abuse and neglect, they have a little bit of an impact, but not a massive impact upon how people turn out.
Really?
Yeah, I mean, if you treat children really badly, that has a big impact on them.
Yeah.
But if you treat children well, you know, not badly, then the biggest sources of variance are the genes they have, and the experiences they have outside of the home.
Okay.
So school, childhood, social groups.
So is that because obviously if you're living in a comfortable, safe environment, then there's nothing for you to have fear from. And if it's the opposite, then that's instilled on you, and it's an uncomfortable environment. Yeah. There's no you don't feel safe, so therefore that is definitely going to change you more than being safe, because your mind will have to react differently, and you'll have to work harder in a way. And if you're constantly in a state of anxiety and fear, that's going to shape who you are, and it's kind of have a massive knock-on effect, isn't it? That's a tough thing to go through, though.
It is, and you are right. So one of the things that we know about the brain is it contains many distinct systems for doing specific things, but they're all really strongly interconnected. So you have something that generates pleasure, and that has its own sort of system within the brain. It uses its own hormones and neurotransmitters. You have a motivation system, an aversion system, social judgment systems, etc. They all do specific things. If you have a lot of stress, like chronic stress, one of the effects of that is that it reduces the activity of motivation and pleasure systems, and increases the activity of aversion systems. So things which typically respond to threats in the environment. So you can think about anxiety, readiness for combat, risk-taking, irritability, all of that sort of stuff. So if you have a lot of stress over a long period of time, you shift the way the brain views the world towards a much more threat detective, anxiety provoking system overall. So early childhood experience, if it creates a lot of stress, can have quite significant long-term impacts. Without that, so like if you've got a good, safe environment, you then tune that brain system to your peer group. And like that makes sense if you think about it. So if you think about evolution, I guess to some degree the purpose of evolution is to ensure that you survive and go on to reproduce. And you're going to do that with your peer group, not your parents. So then your brain selectively pays attention to those individuals who are most likely to have the biggest impact on reproductive success, which is your friends, your social circle. So outside of like a really harsh childhood environment, you then shift your attention to shaping your brain based upon what's going to be successful in the environment you're likely to reproduce in, which is your peer group.
Yeah, I'm just don't know which way to go here. Mark is there. There's that's the one pick there. Let's start with kids brought up in that, because we're talking about bullying, and we know how this works, right? You've been brought up in a stressed environment, you're an anxious kid, you just see everything as, you're a bit of a Debbie Downer in the world, as I like to term it as, because it's a lighter way of phrasing something, but that's how you see everything. Everything's bad, everything's negative, that. And then people aren't going to gravitate to you, because why would they want to hang around with somebody who's negative and brings them down? They want to be surrounded by positive. But what happens if all of your peer group are like that and they're all negative because of the world that they've been raised in, that mindset that's been raised? It's shaping you as a human to go out there, and that knock-on effect can affect your life forever.
Yeah.
It's a big thing.
It is a really big thing. I promise this is relevant to your comment. Social media does that a lot.
Yeah.
So one of the ways that social media works is it responds to that which you spend the most time looking at. So quite often if you see something that annoys you, it'll give you more of it because you've spent a lot of time looking at it. And what you end up with is, on average, males and on average females end up with slightly different pictures of the world, but which plays especially on sex typical fears about the world. So for instance, you will see a lot of stuff directed at women about the threat that men pose to them. And then you will see a lot of stuff online about the way, say for instance, one of the big things I see in my research is discussions around how women judge men on attractiveness, how women value men for certain traits and not others, and how they might use men for their own benefit at the expenses of other men. Now, that's not to say that that's necessarily an accurate picture of the world, but it's what you see. And then if all you do when you're young, for instance, is expose yourself to this, that tunes the way that your brain sees the world. So you then end up in a situation where you're much less trusting of the people around you and much more aware and responsive to these cues of threat. And that shapes a lot of young teen interaction.
And the issue there is that it's gonna promote the bullying effect on yourself, because if you're going in, you're not like, you can't just let things go, for instance, right? And you hang on to things and you're anxious and you're a bit kind of uptight and all that kind of stuff. You've got your guard up all the time. That's been created because of your environment that you've been raised in. You're taking that out to, your friends groups, and then you're the one in the group that, oh, can you smile? We've all heard it. What's wrong with you? Smile more. What's more with your face? And that's what you used to get. There's actually an issue lying underneath there, which is being created by another environment which they had no control over. But they've shaped the world into how they think, so they're bringing it to the table. That's all they're going to do, is bring their experience to the table. When that's deep-rooted like that, it's really hard to get rid of and shake off and change your mental state, because it's almost like you've planted the seed and this has been grown in you for like tens of years. I mean, that again, it's kind of exactly what you're saying. If you're looking at social media all the time, that's being fed. Because it's so much and we spend so much time on social media, then it's fast tracking. Your brain training, isn't it?
Yeah, it absolutely is. I mean, the way, I guess, we would picture that. So if you imagine that your brain is made up of lots of neurons, so lots of cells, and any given behavior that you produce is a result of you activating a specific chain of neurons. And if you activate that chain of neurons, you then produce a behavior, okay? That might be, for instance, a stress response when you see a specific cue. Okay, so something happens in the environment, it activates this chain of neurons and you feel stressed. Okay, that is a really difficult thing to consciously try to fix. So the more that happens, the more you strengthen the connections between those neurons, the easier it is to produce that response in when you see the cue. So you expose yourself over and over in the environment, and you train your brain essentially to respond in that way. So yeah, it fundamentally interacts environment and biology in that way. But it's a little bit more complicated as well, because like evolution, the way evolution works, the way it shapes behavior, is to kind of make one set of actions slightly more probable than another. So like for men, for instance, one of the things they're really sensitive over is threats to status. So if you do something that impacts male status, you get a really big reaction from men. And that's because ancestrally, male status is fundamental to reproductive success. So those men who acquire it and keep it are more likely to reproduce and pass those genes on to the next generation. And so if you exist in an environment where all you ever face are status threats, you tune your brain to respond and see those threats and add a lot of meaning to those threats as well. So it does fundamentally shape the way that you see the world.
I'm going to throw, just at this moment, I'm just going to throw something in there, which is not non-academic, how I'm going to term this.
Okay.
Why do women like bad boys?
Okay, so...
Because it's a thing. And is that because of the dominance of the male? And therefore your children are more likely to live because of that strength of the dominance of the male? Is that a thing?
So there's a couple of different things here, right? This is a really interesting question.
But I butchered it.
But I know exactly what you mean.
Yeah, thank you.
So the preference for bad boys. Okay, a bit of a distinction, because I think there's a problem with cross-sex mind reading here. So when men talk about nice people, they're talking about you do something good for someone, you help them, classic definitions of niceness. So when you think about someone who's bad, you think kind of the opposite of that. But I think there's a little bit of a conflation where what's meant by nice and bad is more along the lines of weakness and strength. So nice people tend to be very easy to manipulate. They tend not to want to assert themselves at the expense of others, especially. And there's a cost to that. So one of the things that you see across female species, across species in females, is a selection for males that are likely to be competitively successful, and who are able or willing to provision resources. So that does two things. It means because reproduction is really expensive for females compared to males, and thus comes with a lot of costs. If you get a dominant male, then those genes are likely to pass on to the next generation, which means your offspring are likely to be successful, and that makes that cost worthwhile. If you get a male who can provision resources and keep them, that reduces the cost of reproduction and makes it likely that your offspring are going to survive. And how males do that is usually competition between themselves. So there's like this really class bird species that are they're called bower birds. And the male builds a huge nest, and then it goes around and it collects fruits. And the females go around and look at all of the different nests and choose the one that's the best with the most fruits, the most arranged fruits and all that. But what that actually is the male displaying his ability, but also stealing and defending his resources from other males. So if they have them, that's evidence of the fact that they're able to provision and have the genes necessary to be able to actually compete. So the bad boy preference is quite deeply evolved, in that it's an indicator of a man who's likely to be competitively successful, to be able to outcompete males, which has benefits for the offspring. But it depends upon what the woman wants. So for short-term relationships, like one-night stands, for instance, there's quite, I think, a nice relationship between what we would call dark personality, so psychopathy, Machiavellianism, and narcissism, and reproductive success in men. So they are likely to sleep with more people. But for a long-term relationship, a much more stable one, that tends to not be advantageous.
Yeah, because it tends not to work out because there's always pushback.
Yeah.
It's like, it's almost, how to term it. It's sort of, you can't sprint all the time.
Yeah.
The marathon. It's not, life's not a sprint, it's a marathon. And the excitement of kind of the bad boy, it's kind of that. There's some, but what is that and why is that? And I can also flip it on its head and maybe say, are women trying to trying to change and nurture? Do they want to go, oh, I can fix this guy, I can change this fella, do you know what I mean? I can really shape him to something a little bit better if he calms down a bit, but I like him because he's stable and he can provide.
Yeah.
Is there something in that as well about the female psyche as well?
Yeah, so like male and female mate choice is, there's a lot of similarities, but there are key differences, and a lot of that has to do with the selective pressures across evolutionary history. So like for females across animals, not just us, but across animals, it's quite a costly activity. So you get a lot of cautious skepticism over the assessment of males. But for males, it's much less cheap. Oh, so just much more cheap, I should say.
Yeah.
Much less costly. And so there you get a big drive towards competitive success. So the things which drive male and female preference are slightly different.
It's like long game, short game, isn't it?
Yeah.
Men, it's a short game. Women, it is a long game.
Depending upon whether a man is able to actually do that. So a lot of male success depends upon their physical attractiveness. It's like you see that on Tinder, like online dating, right? Where
swipe right and all that.
Yeah, exactly. Where women swipe no, say no to most of the men they see, and select yes to very few men. The consequence is that that man then has loads of women to choose from, and so can enact what he wants out of the mating arrangement. If he wants to sleep with them without commitment, he can do that, and if the women don't like it, he just goes to the next one, essentially. So there you get a reversal of what normally happens, where women have to compete for very few men and thus relax their standards to gain access to them. And that's where you see a lot of relationship tension, for instance, where women will get involved with a man and then the man will not treat them the way they want to be treated, and that shapes the way that they view men. And often that's because that man's quite desirable and has the option to choose other women, essentially. Whereas in most non-online dating environments, it doesn't quite work like that. You have much more, you have selection going a little bit more equally there.
Well, there's a chance to get to know that person first, and you got to be in the room and understand them and say the mannerisms. So there's almost like there's a drip feed effect to sort of build up to that.
Yeah.
Because you could instantly not be attracted to them, but you go, actually, I like the way they are, and kind of you can. I'll give a little bit of that away to this. It's balancing the pros and the cons about a person, isn't it? Really, but you kind of get time to shape that. I mean, that's how I was raised in my environment. But to be chosen from a picture, it's a much different story. I mean,
very different.
How's that changed? Like that's got to have changed and shaped people through a short space of time, hasn't it?
Really, really big. I mean, just to give a context before I talk about it, we know that. So if you look at the data on how people meet, so you go back, say, 30, 40 years, most people meet a partner through friends, family, at work, or at school, or their local environment. Okay, so quite small, very social. You get to learn a lot about people that way. But now it's about 50% of couples meet online. So there you look at attractiveness first, and only if they meet your minimum requirements do you then say yes to them and look at everything else in them before you decide to swipe right and say yes to them. So what you end up with is a culture that very much more focuses on physical attractiveness, and fuels a lot of mental health issues as a result of it. So what I think, this is an interesting statistic, but one that I think quite shocks people. Body insecurity, so insecurity about the way you look, it has historically been much more dominated by women and girls than men and boys, which is to say it's been more of a concern for women and girls than it has been for boys. But that's changed a lot recently. So you see a really big uptick in how important that is to men and boys, so the physical attractiveness. And you see it in online culture, so talk about height, Other things like income, status, all that sort of stuff. It fuels what's called incel culture. So people who classify themselves as involuntarily celibate. It underpins a lot of what happens with like Andrew Tate, and it feeds into a lot of the negatively reinforcing stereotypes that men and women have about each other online.
Can you explain a little bit more? Because incel is a word we throw around a lot, but no one has really ever broken this down.
Yeah.
We just associate as incel with a group of people. Bang, negative. What is incel?
Okay, so a little distinction. An incel is basically defined as someone who is involuntarily celibate, which is to say they want to be in a relationship, whether it be sexual or romantic or loving, whatever it might be, but are unable to find a partner to be in a relationship with. Okay, so you've got involuntarily celibate people, and then there is a little subculture online, the one people normally refer to as incels, who adopt a very specific ideological explanation for why that is the case. So they call it a black pill, and basically that is a claim that female mate preferences are evolved, which they are, but are absolute, which that's not quite true, which is to say, if you're not very tall, you're not really wealthy, you're not really attractive, in the incel worldview, you might as well be worthless, essentially. And so you end up with a community that becomes quite resentful about their lack of reproductive success overall. And there you get a little, well, you get a fair bit of misogyny that comes out of it. And they struggle a lot in life. So we know that there's something called attractiveness bias. And you, generally speaking, again, this is all unconscious, but what you tend to see there is people judge attractive people much more positively. It's moral character, it's whether they're good at tasks, for instance, it's whether they're likely to be good friends. So more attractive people are just thought of more positively. So for involuntarily celibate people, it's usually men. They have, they're not perceived as attractive. They have lots of reproductive failure and lots of culture online which tells them that they are failures. And then the attractiveness bias on top of it, which whenever they speak about it, usually triggers quite a negative pushback. So it's very self-reinforcing.
This goes back to exactly what we talked about earlier, about your environment.
Yeah.
That culture and that community, which all it is, it's a group, and lots of people want to be a part of a group. And I'm finding, I think since COVID, the separation and the opening up of many groups and everybody wanting to be a part of something, I think has exploded quite a bit, because I don't think it was prevalent as much beforehand, before COVID. And things started to be divided, and then we started to have the subcultures of the cliques, and I think that's where we talked about earlier on is it's your environment shapes your attitude that you take into life, and that's the problem. That's the problem there.
Yeah.
But this is online. It's not in your environment at home. You're in home, surrounded by whatever that is. Then you're inside another thing, which is the phone. There's two environments then. You're not just having one environment, you've got two environments. I've just thought about that. I really kind of I never realized that. You're a product of two environments now.
Yeah, one of which is what we call like a super stimulus, which is to say it doesn't really reflect the reality of social interaction, but it interacts with brain systems in such a way that it's very, very powerful.
And it promotes your belief system.
Well, yeah, because of the way that algorithms work, right? So so we are social species. We are primed by evolution to bond. That looks a little bit different between men and women. So then you form friendship groups, typically coalitions, in order to satisfy that need. But that coalition formation, the friendship formation, kind of drops off over the recent decades, and it's very much replaced by online environments. And in those online environments, like with, for instance, the incel culture, where you have real examples of behavior, for instance, women who say, I only want men who earn $600,000 a year. Like, there are very few women who say that, but because of the way it interacts with evolved biases, like male concerns over mate value, that becomes the dominant narrative. It gets massively amplified online. And so your judgment of how valuable you are as a person is skewed by a minority view that's massively exaggerated in an online system.
Before social media and stuff, if you were surrounded by 10 people that had the same sort of position in life and the same narrative, that's the same thing as like just you being fed 10 of your favorite people online, isn't it, really?
Right, exactly.
So that's all you're going to see and hear, and that's all you're going to believe, because you're going to be surrounded by that, and then you go, this is the way everyone thinks.
Yeah.
All right, I found my group because this makes me feel better, that I feel bad about myself, so therefore this is reinforcing me to go, I'm not alone.
Yeah.
It's so hard, Mark, because we want to find some connection with people.
Yeah.
We want to find that. But there's a negative to that as well. There's a complete negative, because it's not the right thing you should be looking at.
Yeah.
And it's training your belief, especially in a young mind that's not developed, who doesn't have the skill sets to go, this is bullshit. They're just trying to pull the wool over your eyes kind of thing.
Yeah.
And then because we can, I know everyone brings this up, but the show Adolescence was pretty much a good case to view. We talked about it, we knew about it, because it hit home.
Yeah.
It really did. And what the best thing about it was just a good kid.
Right.
A normal kid. And I think that's what really got everyone.
It scares people. I think it resonates with people. A lot of what Adolescence did. One of the reasons why I think it was a good program, even though it wasn't quite accurate in the way it displays like incel culture, for instance.
Okay, so I mean, you can explore that, but just finish. I just want you to finish your point, but really, I don't want to lose that.
Yeah, but it resonates with people because it strikes the things that we are have that sort of big evolutionary bias to pay attention to. So for instance, everyone wants to protect their children. Most people anyway, as an average, they want them to do well. They also, for instance, have a big preference to protect young people, especially young girls. So you have this sort of ominous online culture, which, at least in the program, produces the violence in part of Jamie, so the main character, against the girl that he kills. So that very much strikes home with many, many different fears that we just possess. We worry, for instance, what's happening online with children. I think, like, obviously it's a drama. It's
an exaggerated version of something,
but there is something there, I think, in terms of the impact of social media. I mean, for instance, right. I don't know if you've heard the term the male loneliness crisis. So if you look at the data, there's a substantial proportion of especially young men who don't have anyone really that they can turn to. There's a smaller proportion of young women where you see that same effect, but it is bigger in men. And if you look at TikTok, for instance, one of the things that you will see quite commonly is people just laughing at it. There's phrases like "men aren't lonely enough," "let them suffer after everything that they've done," and that arises out of the algorithm that's fed to, say, women, for instance, about highlighting the threat that men are to them. So they get an exaggerated view of the threat men are. That's not to say they aren't, because I mean, historically there is stuff there. But it overemphasizes that, and thus when you see men saying, "I'm really lonely," the response is, "And so what?" The consequence is those men who are saying that put the feelers out there and see a very hostile environment that does not care whether they're lonely or not. And that really negatively reinforces a lot of the depression, a lot of the anxiety, the suicidality that you see quite common in that.
It's just it's because you're seeing it more often than you would normally without having a device in your hand, you know. And social media is, adults have a problem with it, never mind kids, right? We have a problem with picking the thing up. Oh, who's looked at it? Oh, it's got some likes. Oh, it's got some views. Same with this. Exactly the same with this, right?
Yeah.
But I guarantee you, I'll put something up and we'll do a nice deep discussion. Algorithm doesn't really care about that. It cares about the throwaway stuff and it cares about what's trending and all that kind of thing. That's not really helping anyone.
Yeah.
It doesn't help anyone. Yeah. So all the stuff that's good for people and just want to help somebody, unless it's already established, it doesn't really kind of push through because there's a lot of noise out there. And it's tragic in a way. It's a shame because when people do finally go, this is fantastic. I'm like, yeah, but the algorithm isn't pushing that. Yeah. It's pushing throwaway moments. Exactly. It's pushing addictiveness. It's pushing
exactly what it is.
So I want to throw straight into this because this is something that I have a real bee in my bonnet about. My kids watch shorts. They don't have TikTok. They don't have Instagram, any of that stuff.
Yeah.
It's the same thing. I taught them, I look at myself, it's the same thing.
Yeah.
They don't like to watch long form stuff. They do, we cap it and go, watch a TV series at night, have a balance. We used to get around watching TV.
Yeah.
We're just doing the same thing as what they are, but we don't know where this is going to lead to. Yeah. That's the problem, Mark. That's my worry about that.
Yeah, so I'm not... The data on it's a little bit mixed. So like there is some stuff that suggests that short form content is quite negative overall, but there is some data that casts a little bit of doubt on it. One thing that's absolutely clear though is those companies are very, very good at understanding how brain mechanisms work.
It's built by therapists or psychologists, isn't it, really?
Yeah, well, because basically you have essentially what I mean, this is a massive oversimplification, right? But essentially what you've got is a brain which is a social monitor that constantly checks its predictions for error. So if something is better than it thinks it is, you get a really big reinforcement spike that makes you do more of it. If something's worse than it is, you get the opposite. So you tend to do less of it overall. So with those short form content, what you have, especially if you're scrolling, is something that's very unpredictable, which might be really good or might not. And if it's really good, like you get a bit of entertainment from it, that really strongly takes advantage of that reinforcement system. So the entire short form content is a really effective way of taking advantage of what the brain actually does. Monitor social information, predict error, and then adjust its behavior based upon whether you get a positive reinforcement or a negative one. So it's perfect for taking advantage of it. And the brain's not very good at doing that long term, because one of the keys with to make that system work is that the reward you get from it needs to come very quickly after the behavior that produces the reward. If it's very fast, you get a strong connection, you get a strong reinforcement, and you do more of it. If there's a long gap, you don't get reinforcement. And so it's much more difficult to promote long form content over short form content because of the way that the brain reinforcement system works.
But we do like long form.
Yeah.
We like story.
Yeah.
We like to sit in the moment. We like to gather information. We like to let people go back and forward and then form an opinion over a period of time. I love that. I think it's great. Something is being built that we are all forced to go that way because it does have an important impact on our lives, our jobs, our livelihoods, you know what I mean? Our social stature, all of this stuff is just forcing us to do things that I guarantee if you asked a lot of people, they'd be happy without it.
Yeah.
So I'm just trying to find a positive in this, Mark. I really need to find a positive in that. I mean, could it train your brain in a way that can vet things quick, or is there anything positive in the short form?
Yeah, I mean, it's not all negative.
Information
right?
gathering. I don't know what it could be, but is it useful?
Yeah, well, I mean, for instance, even in the really dark stuff. So if you take the incel communities, for instance, right, where there's a lot of suicidal ideation, there's a lot of distrust of women, for instance, right. Even there, you can find a benefit to the individual because what it actually represents is a social group where they might not actually have one. So yeah, which I know sounds because to some degree it's like, yeah,
join the Nazi party. It's kind of like also, there's a big group, there's lots of people like it. Do you know what I mean? It's like it's kind of similar, isn't it? Really?
Yeah, I mean for sure, right?
Yeah.
Like you
it's
get
an extreme. It's an extreme example, but I mean, come on, there's always a group somewhere that's not doing good things.
Yeah, but I guess my point was with the online stuff. So separate the awful stuff, right? Which no one contests isn't anything but awful, right? It does socially bond people. You just have to be really careful with it. So like you were talking about the preference for long form content, kind of like what we're doing now, right? Yeah. In young individuals, the way that their brain operates, it's not fully mature. You don't have a lot of what's called inhibitory control. So like impulse control, for instance, you are much more susceptible to short form content there than you are to long form. So age has a big thing to play with that as well.
So it's feeding into how your brain reacts and what it wants.
Yeah, and you can get some quite interesting educational stuff out of it. Like I won't name the companies or anything like that, but there is a child's short form educational app which is really good at getting children to understand language and mathematics and that sort of stuff. It takes advantage of that reward system the same way something like TikTok does, but the overall aim of it's just different. So you can produce useful things out of it. Like for instance, I really admire like what you do, right? Like the grassroots organizations that really try to help people on the ground. You can take advantage of those short form content in order to gain access to more views, to more awareness of what it is that you guys do. And I think that would be useful.
I mean, it works. We found both, I don't want to get into too much, but we both podcasts. People go, oh, it's really good, successful. Yeah. I've seen all the clips. You're like, well, why don't you go and watch the full conversation? Because there's much more. We get into much more. But I just don't know. It's kind of for a specific bunch of people. But again, I'm not denying the fact because I'm trying to find a positive. That's what I'm trying to use it for. Yeah. I'm trying to shape it into not clip it and be clickbait because I've stopped watching certain podcasts because of titles.
Yeah.
And I don't think it's right, and I don't think it's true, even though they're getting more views. It's just not right. It's not right to feed people clickbait titles. And it's just bold and brash in your face. But the algorithm feeds into that. Yeah. So you cannot really win in a way unless you're doing that. But I'm like, well, try and hold on to the integrity of the thing that you're trying to do, right? Without losing it. But try and just do the creative short form. Yeah. Before you came in, I was looking at titling of clips. Yeah. I like a quote because it's true. I don't like to edit this, but I would edit something which is a bit more entertaining to get to the point because that's what people like. That's just an advertisement for the podcast. This is a quote that I really think it resonates and it might resonate with people. For you to go, actually, I need to know a bit more about this. Yeah. That's what I'm trying to do. Yeah. But that's really hard because it might not favor in the algorithm. It might just want you to go, Mark's talking about incels are bad. That's what I want you to put. And I'm going, no. Yeah. It has to be a speech from the words that you said. I can't manipulate any word. If you say that's too long, I'm like, it's important to me. Yeah, yeah. But they don't care. So it's a real chicken and egg. It's just a real frustrating environment to be in, but it's using it to try and do something good.
Yeah, I understand.
But it drives you nuts. It does. It really does.
It's hard because they have a very clear understanding of how human psychology works. Like those big tech companies, like Tinder's really good at it. So for instance, one of the things that it does there is it pre-stacks. So you sign in, the first few people you see are usually the ones who get the most likes. And what the reason it does
popular
that,
people.
yeah, like the attractive ones, right?
Yeah.
And
it's everything in life. Popular people always win. What's going on? Sorry.
Yeah, but it also really takes advantage of the way that the brain works. So like, you've got your uncertainty, you swipe, you see someone who's really attractive, you get a big reward to it. And the more you do that, the more you reinforce the swiping to the belief that you're going to get something good out of it. And only once you've done that sufficiently to develop a pattern where you just swipe, they then start showing you all of the rest of the people. And that also has a purpose to it. So reinforcement of behavior only occurs if there's uncertainty. So if you get an unattractive person, you're like, I'm not really liking that. Get an attractive person. If it's random, so you don't know when the reward's coming, it keeps you addicted. So they're really good at maximizing and capturing how people's brains work. So like basically what you've got is this social judgment system monitoring what's happening, and then you have new technology designed specifically to take advantage of it. And within that, you then have competition for success, for money, for followers, for likes and all that sort of stuff. So you see people drifting more and more towards the things which generate income and success as a form of status contest, basically.
I'll throw something controversial out just while we're on the subject. I don't think there's a correlation between money and quality. I really don't.
Yeah.
Especially now.
Yeah.
Because popularity doesn't mean to say it's quality, because it doesn't. You've driven it down in quality because there's an industry, which I'm a part of, which has been driven into the ground for throwaway content.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. I mean, I get that completely. Like the divorcing of the things which generate money and the things which are then quality. So like historically, for instance, if you make a lot of success, it's usually because you've earned it, right? You've done something that people like, people want. They grant you status, they grant you money and all that sort of stuff out of the hard work, essentially. But like a really good example of the divorcing of that from interest is the usage of AI. So now you can generate videos that aren't real but get a lot of attention with a prompt.
Yeah,
right.
There's no skill there, but you're just feeding into the algorithm, which is telling you what it wants to say.
Yeah, and I've heard some stuff. So this isn't my field of expertise, so it's me speculating, right? Okay. But I've heard some stuff that in the future, because AI generated content becomes so popular, what you're doing, so this real human interaction, genuine question of what's happening, that gains popularity. And to some degree you see that with the decline of popular quote mainstream media and the rise of things like podcasts as a source of information.
Yeah, well, I do think it's a good thing, because I just want to hear genuine conversations. I want to hear how people talk, because people talk like this all the time, so that's why I want to do it, because a voice like me can ask questions. Whether or not it's articulated well or not, it doesn't really matter. It's my brain, and other people might think the same as me, because I know they do, because I've talked to them.
Yeah, right, exactly.
And I'm just trying to see patterns in things as well. So, okay, I'm going to park that, and I want to just jump into. I want to do really kind of look at two things. I mean, Mark, we could do a full series on episodes, and I think we should pitch this to Southern University, because I think this should be bite-sized, short-form content. Anyway. Addictive personality, while we're on the subject of social media, and I want to talk about a word which gets flagged all the time.
Okay.
Suicide.
Yeah.
And mental health in men. So I want to cover those two. So can we go from, there might be a connection and a correlation between the two, to be honest. Addictive personalities. Talk to a lot of people, ex-addicts, and then they turn it around later in life and they move into sport if they get through the other thing.
Yeah.
So they're replacing an addiction with another addiction. I'm the same.
Yeah.
Self-diagnosed, of course, Mark. Just because of people who I've talked to, but I have the obsession as well. So I constantly need to do things, but I constantly obsess over things.
Yeah.
That's hard and it never ends, and it always wears, you kind of get exhausted by it, but you can't stop it. Do you know what I mean?
Like the rumination on things.
I did start a podcast called Overthinking many years ago,
Okay.
so it's in line, But the more knowledge and the more podcasts I see, it's just understanding who you are. That's all it is. Yeah. But I'm not going to wear it on a badge, and I'm going to spout it lots of times. But I'm just intrigued to go. I'll notice some patterns in my life that leads to me at this point in time, but that gets hard because when you reach a certain age, if you're not distracted by the success of a life, then it becomes a problem because you obsess about you're not good enough.
Yeah.
There's definitely a connection here.
Yeah.
And I do think that addictive personality, you're feeding something. What is that? So that's my first question. And why is that? Why does the brain go there? Obsessiveness on top of that, it's even worse. But replacing that with something else, it's a healthier version of it, but you're still self-abusing in a way. So let's cover the addiction first.
Okay, so in terms of addiction, so you remember the system I was talking to you about, the one that pays attention to error and how rewarding a stimulus is. So that's called the dopamine system, and basically that's the thing in the brain which reinforces connections between neurons, specifically in order to motivate you to do something. So if you say, for instance, tell a joke and everyone in the room laughs really loads, everyone's like telling you how amazing you are, you get a really big dopamine response.
Instant reward as well.
Yeah, exactly. Well, that's exactly what that is. And that makes it more likely that your brain will use that path of neural connections to produce a similar behavior in the future. Okay. So with addiction, you introduce a lot of things, whether it be, for instance, gambling, whether it be drug usage, super calorie dense foods.
Yeah, foods.
Yeah, all of which are not, quote, natural stimuli. So what they do is they produce really high levels of dopamine in response to their consumption. So let's say, for instance, take cigarette smoking, really quite an addictive thing. Let's say you start, you get the initial hit from it, which creates the reinforcement, triggers that dopamine system. What then happens is you associate the things that happen in your environment when you first got it to the thing itself. So if, for instance, you go outside to smoke a cigarette, your brain associates stepping out of the door with the anticipation of the reward, right? It's one of the reasons why it's really hard to quit smoking, not only because it's very addictive, but because the cues which trigger the wanting of it are really common. So you've got this system that responds to cues, that motivates you to do something. And with drugs, for instance, heroin, morphine, like all those sorts of things, they create really, really super strong responses.
It's a more intense version, isn't it?
Yeah, that is very, very hard to stop. So a way of thinking about them neural circuits is like, once they're activated and the signals running through the circuit, it's really deterministic. So you basically produce the behavior if you can't stop that neural action from happening. And the brain has systems which does it. They call it inhibitory control. It stops those signals from being sent. But with something like drug addiction, the signals are so powerful, even in response to inhibitory control, it's really difficult not to perform the behavior.
Because your brain's going, I've got a condition, or this is how my brain operates, is how I like to call it. I need to find this reward system. You find the reward system, and then you take a thing, and then your body needs that thing to make itself feel better all of the time. So you've just created your own loop, haven't you, really?
And the more you use it, the more you need it in order to produce the same sort of feeling that you get.
Yeah,
And that's quite interesting. So if you look at stress, one of the things long-term stress does is it makes you more susceptible to seeking out these dopamine hits or pleasure, basically. Not the same system, but quite related. So if you feel anxious and depressed, you're more likely to fall into those patterns. So that's quite a common thing. So if you are an addict and you stop, and then something really bad happens in your life, that can be quite a big increase in the probability that you go back to the thing which you were initially addicted to, because of the way that the brain prioritizes that hit of dopamine and or pleasure.
But again, it's just a skill that you haven't got, and you need to kind of train yourself to kind of sit in that, and you don't give yourself that. But it's hard, because when you start rewarding yourself with that continuously all the time, it's hard not to have that.
Yeah.
Because you kind of go into a spiral, and I get it, and say that the connection now, you're going home, you're a bit depressed, I'll have a drink. Do you know what I mean? I'll have one beer.
Yeah.
Then, oh, that was all right, I'll have two, I'll feel better. And then you're back tomorrow, you're doing the same thing again.
And exactly.
Because you're not fixing the problem, which is underlying, do you know what I mean?
And there's quite an interesting thing where, on average, one of the things that testosterones do, especially during development, is they impact the way inhibitory control systems work. So women tend to be, on average, slightly better at inhibiting behavior, and men very slightly worse. And on the extremes, that means you see a lot more impulsive behavior from men. So you tend to see a lot of overrepresentation in men in many different addictions as a result of that. And one of the other quite interesting things is, if you look at something like CBT, so cognitive behavioral therapy, one of the things that does is it teaches people to recognize the start of the spiral of the things which reinforce internally, and then try to interrupt it. And that interrupting is basically the inhibitory control thing. So it's a way of building a mechanism to try to prevent the spiral overall.
I talked to somebody yesterday, and she mentioned CBT and then spiral in exactly the same way.
Oh, did you? Okay.
So the same way, and she was an ex-addict.
Okay.
So that is pretty much probably from her lived experience of going through therapy and stuff, and understanding what that is as well. It's really tough to stop that spiral.
It's very hard.
It is tough. I think it's seeing it from a different angle.
Yeah.
But how can you stop your brain, because it goes in a natural direction?
Yeah.
And I do think that's a problem. I mean, I'd probably be throwing more personal stuff into this than I'm not supposed to, and I don't really want to, but using it as an example, that's the way I think. Yeah. That's how I go down. But there's a keeping up with the Joneses, but I'm keeping up with the Joneses of myself.
Yeah. Which is hard as well.
Which is hard, because I'm not externalizing. The person I'm trying to compete with is me.
Yeah.
So you're in the room with the same spiral loop all the time. It's tough.
Yeah. Especially with something like that, where it like, if, say, for instance, you've got a standard that you set yourself to, and you fail to live up to it, that can create a spiral. So in addition to this reward system, the dopamine system, you have a system which modulates pleasure, and its opposite, so euphoria and dysphoria, so feeling really good and feeling really bad. And if you, say, for instance, set yourself a goal and you underperform on it, it emphasizes the I feel bad circuits, which can then quite easily spiral as well if you're not careful with the thought processes that you've got as well. And especially if you've been in a long-term stress environment for a long time, you're primed to see threats, whether it be social or from whatever it might be. And so it's much easier to tip into that very easily than it is to tip into like a really positive state if you've been primed to see threat everywhere as well.
Interesting word, primed, because primed is what we talked about earlier on. It's your environment that you raised.
Yeah.
I was told that I live in a constant state of fear and anxiety. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. So there's a vicious loop. And then on top of the ADHD, and then the high achieving mentality, and then the obsessive nature. And then it's just like, all right, that ice bath's not going to really do any good for all of this. It's just going to stop something for about half an hour. So it's trying to reshape the brain and understand kind of how you can't fix it, I don't think, but I think you can find tools to manage it.
Yeah.
Are those real, Mark? Is that kind of the best solution to these things?
Yeah, I mean, there's lots of different things that you could do. I mean, for me, right? If I just go back to the very start of our conversation, I had a fairly stressful sort of teen years, which primes me to feel bad about things quite frequently. So if something happens and I'm like, oh God, that didn't go as well as I thought, I'll sit and I'll ruminate on it. And if I'm not careful and I don't catch myself, I can very quickly find myself with a lot of negative speak, convincing myself that actually that was the end of the world when it need not be. So in terms of intervention strategies on that, and again, it varies with the thing and it varies with the person as well. So like genetic variants, for instance, can impact how responsive your brain is to dopamine. So if you've got a variant that makes you really responsive to it, that makes it a lot harder not to pursue those sort of pleasure activities. But cognitive behavioral therapy is quite good. Lots of awareness and understanding of the specific things which lead to it. And lots of understanding the cues which likely trigger the behavior can be quite useful as well. And this is what I was talking about, earlier when I said like psychology and research is a little bit of me search. So quite often people come in with something that they struggle with, understand what's going on in terms of the behavior, and then apply that to themselves and to others to try to stop themselves going down that route.
Well, it's just having the interest, isn't it? And there's something wrong. How can I make this better? How can I fix this? I think it's understanding that you don't want to be like this. You're trying to change it, but it's hard to change. You're talking like 30, 40 years of kind of mapping the brain to, just cheer up or change your mindset. You're like, what? How do you do that? You have to actively try and change that. That leads perfectly straight into suicidal thoughts and depression. I really do think it does, because that's the down to the up, which is the obsessive ADHD. I mean, they're kind of very similar in line, lots of people say ADHD, they're scatty to forget things, but if you've got the obsessiveness, that tidies all that up.
Right.
It's like having two robots. It's like you got two parts of the thing. The two sides of the coin, they're both different, but they both serve a good purpose, Is there any correlation to suicidal ideation and those things we've been speaking about?
So suicidal ideation's an interesting one, right? Because it's obviously awful, right? But the things which lead to the spiral of it are at least partially fairly well understood. I mean, obviously it varies a lot between individuals, but the general patterns, you see a lot more men who commit suicide than women do. And you see the sex differences in the things which likely lead to it. So if you look at male suicide, it's primarily things like income instability, loss of jobs, relationship ending is a really big one for men. And then out of that, you start to see addictions, substance uses, which then also can lead to suicide. For women, you tend to see a lot more interpersonal stress. So things like relationship breakdowns or really big rifts between families or things like domestic violence. So slightly different overall origins, but which roughly map onto really quite deeply evolved behaviors. So if you think about income, relationship stability, finances, jobs, they are all primary male mate value characteristics. So they're things that on average grant men attractiveness and status within really whatever society you look at. So one of the things that we see in the data is high levels of status success protects against these negative environmental changes. So high testosterone reduces how effective the anxiety inducing parts of the brains are, makes them less powerful overall. But if you lose your status, especially really quickly, then you see the opposite. So you see the reactivation of those circuits, but very powerfully so. And then you see a lot of instability in how behaviors manifest. So you see a lot of impulsive behavior, which can lead to things like suicide. So you drop your testosterone levels as status decreases. You increase the negative thoughts that you've got. You decrease the pleasure. You decrease motivation to seek stuff. And then you also begin a rumination process. So you start trying to problem solve in your head, keep repeating it. And if you can't solve the problem, it makes you feel worse and worse and worse. And then that interacts with the whole system overall to trigger things like suicidal ideation.
Because you can't see a way out. That's
Exactly,
the thing.
yeah.
Pretty much you're losing your purpose.
Yeah.
And I think we all need a purpose as well.
Yeah.
Men are reactive more than women,
Yeah.
I think, to things, especially actions and activity, right? And then you've got that spiral, that rumination thing as well, and trying to fix the problem. And if you can't, then what's the solution?
Yeah. And it is a very unusual mindset to be in. I was there once. Towards the end of my school bullying, I just could not see anything positive in the future at all. And so very much I come at that both from an academic perspective and having been there myself.
So how did you come through that? Was that just time?
It took a long time.
Find a new purpose and...
Yeah, so, God, for the longest time after that. So actually, it was my brother coming into the house which stopped us doing what I was doing. I don't think he knows that.
Yeah.
But he probably saved us that night without his knowledge. And I guess it was just a very slow, it was right at the end of school. I moved to a different environment. I spent many years trying to relearn the social skills I didn't get at school because of all the bullying and all that sort of stuff. And actually it was learning the psychology behind the way people behave, which fundamentally changed the way I viewed it. It took away I don't understand why people are doing what they're doing. I don't understand why I'm doing what I'm doing too. Okay, I understand this a little bit more. I might not like it, but I understand it a little bit more, and that robs it of the power, I think, to some degree.
Yeah, because it's understanding, but it kind of it almost puts it into a different category.
Yeah.
And then you can look at it as a category.
Yeah.
So it's almost taking it from yourself, putting it next to you and go, oh, it's a thing, it's scientific.
Yeah.
There's a reason for that.
Yeah.
You know, and then you can actually externalize, you know, instead of internalize.
Yeah. And I see that a little bit to some degree with some of the students I teach. So one of the things I teach a lot about is relationships and attractiveness and what that is. And you can often see when you talk to the students, they don't like what the data suggests. But I guess because of my experience, because I understand to some degree anyway, like what goes on behind it, it robs the, for instance, women have a preference for men that are tall, right, or physically strong. Like if you present that information to a man who isn't tall and isn't strong, that can produce quite a negative reaction, right? But if you understand what's going on underneath it, it kind of takes away a little bit of the impact of that, I think.
I think because you can break things down.
Yeah, exactly.
I think it's that, isn't it? It's looking at it for a subjective, objective. Yeah, it's interesting though. Let's finish on just one last message. I always kind of leave it. It might be a little bit different to yourself, but you could bring personal issues into this as well. Like a message to people out there that might help them, whatever they're going through.
Yeah. I think in terms of, I mean, obviously it's gonna depend specifically upon what's going on in your life. The one thing I would be cautious of is pulling too much meaning from what you see online. There's a very big cause of spiraling. I mean, for instance, we have these social judgment systems. They're very, very good at monitoring our perceived place in the social hierarchy that we see. And then online stuff, Instagram, etc., all you ever see are the highlights of everybody else's life. So the comparison is really, really dangerous because no matter what you do, you're never going to be as successful as, well, you're never going to view your life as successful as someone else's highlights reel. So keep in mind that what you draw from online content is not that important. And the other big thing I'd say is compared to when I was younger, there are huge numbers of grassroots services that are out there now, which I think are incredible. So there's lots of them which are very much community based, and I think they tap into something really important about the way, especially men, manage their mental health. You have coalition formation, you have sort of deep friendships outside of judgments and fears around appearing weak or low status, for instance. They often understand things in a way a lot of people in your life might not, because they're all in roughly the same sort of situation. So it's worth seeking out a group like that. Very much. I mean, not even minimally, but as a very starting point. Watch what you see online and seek out those sort of support groups because they're really, really good at slowly building you up and meeting the sorts of things that are likely to cause, so I should say combating the sorts of things that are likely to cause depression in the first place. Yeah, and one final thing, like therapy is really good, but it tends to treat the outcome of what's caused it, i.e. the depression itself, and not always the cause of it. And that's where I think learning about sort of status contest and what makes men attractive or high status or desirable can be quite a good place to work on and to address the baseline to protect yourself from future depression or mental health issues. If that makes sense.
It makes sense. That's perfect, Mark. I mean, I just want to finish on, I think what you're saying is great, especially with all of these groups. And one thing is, I know for a fact that they're non-judgmental, and I think that's what people worry about, especially men, is to go in, feel bad. They're going to call us right, so-and-so, or they're going to judge us on this, judge us on that. None of them are judgmental at all. So I think, you can walk in there with your head up or down. It doesn't matter.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I think with that as well, is you don't have to worry about the consequences of it. Like, because I think there is a little bit of a worry. For instance, if you open up to a romantic partner, you worry about the way opening up might affect the way that they view you.
Yeah.
Like you don't have to worry about that with often these other guys as well, because they're with you. You know, they're not looking to be judgmental. They're not looking to be judged. They're there to support, right?
I do think you're right. You hit the nail on the head there. I think it's important to actually have other people to tell you your other issues, because it might not be your partner's not right for that, because they know you too well and too closely, and they might want to try and fix you. You might not need that. It might just be somebody you need to just stand in a group with and have a walk or have a cup of coffee with. That could be all it is, you know. So yeah, I thoroughly agree. Mark, this has been fantastic. Thank you very much.
No problem at all.
Thank
no problem
you.
at all.
Thank you.